It is that time now once again for getting lumped up with my friends. It's RockerMike and Rob that you should know, and you'll find them here on the Rockshow. Ooh, yeah, on the Rockshow.
Good morning, good morning. I hope your Thanksgiving weekend was good.
Thanksgiving.
And this is another exciting episode of the Rock Show, episode 146. Only 4 more episodes into the epic 150 show. And I'm very excited.
You must be
today
lumped
we
up.
got
You
a
just
very
said
special show. We got RockerMike with the knowledge, dropping knowledge. And we're talking about a very popular guy that influenced the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Hendrix. We talk about the great, legendary Buddy Holly.
Yes, and you must be a little lumped up because you just said Thanksgiving weekend.
Oh, man. Still lumped up. Ate so much turkey that I don't know what I did.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, we're talking about Buddy Holly today. And, even today in 2021, he's still an influential guy. Whether you realize it or not, he really invented the idea of the 2 guitars, bass, drum lineup. Okay, that in the 50s, when all of this rock and roll was coming together, really from scratch, combination of country music, R&B. That idea of the 2 guitars was something that, carried on to this day. And, of course, his name, Holly. Okay. I mean, you wouldn't have had the Hollies, the 1960s British band. Also, the Beatles got their name from Buddy Holly's band, the Crickets. It was just it was a total takeoff of that. When they were the Quarrymen early on, before they became the Beatles, they covered "That'll Be the Day," which was Buddy Holly's first big hit. Yeah.
How funny is that? That'll be the day that I died. Look at that.
Yeah, a little prophetic. And he also kind of represents the very creative end of rock and roll. Most people at that time were not writing their own music. Even Elvis didn't write his own. Other people did. Johnny Cash, he was really more country. Chuck Berry had writers with him. He did write some, but Buddy pretty much wrote or co-wrote everything, and he also had a lot of control in the studio as well, which was really unheard of at the time. Nobody had.
He was somebody that he wanted to control. Not too many people had and owned the music and all that, because he was kind of like the guy that helped him out. He was kind of broke at the end. That's why he went back to tour.
Norman Petty, who really helped put him on the map, and then managed him and produced him and made those great recordings. You got to remember that Buddy's career is 2 years long. That's it.
Yeah,
it's just a little bit under 2 years long. And Norman Petty, he couldn't have done it without him, but he also ripped him off. Okay, and I don't know. I don't think a lot of that took years to resolve after his death. His widow had a lot of problems. Maria Elena had a lot of problems with his family afterwards. Okay, as far as rights to music and all kinds of stuff. Now, to this day, since that time, she's controlled his estate, and anything to do with Buddy Holly kind of goes through her. However, a lot of people don't know Paul McCartney actually owns the publishing rights to Buddy Holly's stuff. Okay, so and he did. I don't know when he did that. It might have been like in the early '80s, because when the Buddy Holly story movie came out, I think that was 1978 with Gary Busey. very popular film. It was criticized for not being accurate. I still like the movie, but there are inaccuracies in it. Paul McCartney was annoyed by the inaccuracies, and he actually made a documentary in the 80s called The Real Buddy Holly Story. And it's a documentary. He interviewed a lot of people, Keith Richards, I think George Harrison, a bunch of people were interviewed.
Yeah.
And then he I guess he makes sure that all the rights are correct and everything. Because after he died, I would say within the next few years, tons of stuff came out. It's kind of like what happened with Jimi Hendrix. When Jimi Hendrix died, there's more releases after Jimi Hendrix died than when he was alive. Okay, it's the same with Buddy Holly. Buddy Holly only had, with the Crickets, he had one album.
Yeah.
And then he had one solo album, I believe. And you might say, what's the difference? Well, there was a difference because he was actually on two labels at the same time, as a solo artist and in the Crickets.
Yeah.
And I'll get into all that, why that is.
You want to hear something too funny thing? Even after he died, the Crickets still performed a little while.
Yes, they did. No, they performed for quite a while afterwards. I've never seen any footage of it. I don't think. I don't know who sang. Okay, be interesting. I guess. I mean, they could all carry a tune. If you listen to the backing vocals and stuff of the Buddy Holly stuff, that's the Crickets doing the backing vocals. They could sing. I don't know which one took over the lead, but yeah, they carried on a little bit.
Something funny. If you look on YouTube and you look reminiscing of Buddy Holly.
Yeah, reminiscing.
It's the Crickets, a documentary about the Cricket after he died.
Oh, I got to check that out.
And some of them came back, and there've been different formation of the Crickets.
Yeah.
And another thing, his last name was it was a misspell.
Yep, I'll get into that. Yeah,
which was another thing, and he liked it. I guess.
EY. Yeah.
I guess that's what it is. Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting stuff. And one of our friend Danucci was talking. The guy that didn't want to get paid the $36.
Oh, Dion DiMucci. Yes.
Yeah.
He's often interviewed when it comes to Buddy Holly because of the connection with The Last Day when Buddy Holly died. Dion was almost on that plane. Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about watching his guitar. Like, it's fucking crazy. He had his guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a shock, And, I think that in the documentary that we watched, the British documentary on Buddy Holly, that's on YouTube, they brought up a good point. A woman brought up a good point about how, people think that the assassination of JFK was the loss of innocence in this country. And really, it was the day Buddy Holly died.
Yeah.
With Richie Valens and the Big Bopper, the day the music died. That's what it's called.
Yeah, that's where they got American Pie from.
Yeah, right. That's right. Don McLean got that from that whole incident. It's all about that. It was a time when, no one, the 50s were a happy time.
Yeah.
And we had, we were away from World War II. It was a happy time. The youth there was a youth culture for the first time. Okay. And a lot of that was, revolving around these rock and roll bands that were just starting. And to have three of them die in one day at the same time was huge. It was like what the hell happened, and people literally cried, girls and guys too, were like, I can't believe they're dead,
crazy.
So it was really a huge thing, and one thing too to mention, and I'll get into all this, is the today when there's an accident, okay, a tragedy of some kind, and if you notice how the news handles it, they never say who it is who died unless everybody's been notified, the family members. And that came out of this incident because Maria Elena, Buddy's wife, Buddy's mother, found out on TV.
Yeah.
That's horrible. To find something out. Now I think over the years it's happened again with other things, but there's an actual policy now with authorities to do this. To let everybody know, the family members know before the news comes out on who it is. They'll talk about the accident, but they'll just say, unknown person at this point.
You know when they did that? Remember when Kobe Bryant died? It took a while before they say it was Kobe.
Yeah, because the family wasn't notified, probably.
They would say, "Oh, a helicopter went down," and it's not like into maybe 2 hours later when the wife and everybody got notified that it was confirmed. It was It was Kobe by a helicopter and all this and crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you could have your cell phone off, right? You don't get the call, and then that holds everything back. But it's a good policy. It's not good to find out your husband died on TV. That's horrible.
Yeah.
So all right, so let's get into this whole fascinating story about Buddy Holly. I hope you learn a few things. One thing too before I start is there's that whole Buddy Holly mystique. He's kind of nerdy, and the Buddy Holly glasses and all that stuff. Buddy Holly to me was pretty badass. If you watch how he played guitar, he played it punk rock style, man. Downstrokes. Okay, downstrokes like Johnny Ramone. Okay.
Yeah, he had his own style. He had a style that nobody knew.
And his vocal style was unique. Really like badass. He looked kind of like a, quiet, nerdy kind of guy. He wasn't. That's one thing I like about the Buddy Holly story is they kind of show him as kind of badass and getting drunk and fucking girls and stuff like that. Because that was going on.
Do you ever see the Buddy Holly musical where it started that they introduce him as a country western band?
Yes.
And then they go into the riff and start playing the guy, send me Buddy Holly up here now.
Yep.
That ain't country music.
Well, he did start out with country music. So, all right. So Buddy Holly was born Charles Hardin Holley, and he spelled it Holley. It's important to know that right now.
Yeah.
Okay. He was born on September 7th, 1936 in Lubbock, Texas. He would have been 85 this year if he lived.
Wow.
He was the fourth child of Lawrence Odell, also known as L.O. Holley, and Ella Pauline Drake. His eldest siblings were Larry, Travis, and Patricia Lou. He came from mostly a English and Welsh background, but he actually had some Native American Indian in his bloodline as well. Yeah, he did. And as a child, he just was nicknamed Buddy. It's just something that stuck. The whole family was very musically inclined. All members could play instruments, could sing. Larry and Travis Holley often were in talent contests. One particular contest, they had a very young Buddy in their group, and he really couldn't play anything at that point, and they gave him a violin to just play, but he didn't know how to play it, so they put grease on the strings so it wouldn't make any sound. So he just played away like he was part of it. They ended up winning the talent contest. So
wow.
But right away, I mean, he wanted to play guitar. He wanted to learn how to play, instruments and stuff. Larry, the oldest, he served in the Pacific in World War II in the Navy, and he brought home a guitar that he bought from somebody on his ship, and ended up giving it to Buddy. He was getting piano lessons, Buddy, okay, but then kind of quit right after he got the guitar. His brother Travis would teach him how to play it, okay. Buddy's early influences were Hank Williams, great country artist, Jimmy Rogers, Hank Snow, Bob Wills, and the Carter family. June Carter, Johnny Cash connection there. Okay. He made friends with a guy named Bob Montgomery, and the two would often jam together. They would often listen to the Grand Ole Opry show, the Louisiana Hayride shows. And we've mentioned these shows before when we've talked about country and Western artists. I mean, everybody in the 50s that made their bones, like Johnny Cash, for instance, Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, all these people listened to Grand Ole Opry and Louisiana Hayride. In high school, they began playing together as Buddy and Bob. It was Buddy and Bob, a two-piece. And they would do live gigs around Lubbock. And also they got on a radio show called the Sunday Party Radio Show on KDAV in that area in Texas. That was in 1953. Buddy at the time was also becoming more influenced by a lot of black R&B artists. He would listen in his car late at night after the Lubbock stations would turn off for the night. He would be able to hear some of the farther away stations, and they would be playing R&B music, stuff that he couldn't hear in his own town. He wanted to blend country music and R&B. And that's really what the essence of rock and roll is. Okay, that's how it got started. And even to this day, that's really what it is. It's a combination of white country and western and black R&B. That's really all it is. Graduating high school in 1955, Buddy decided on a career in music. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to do nothing else. So he was inspired by seeing Elvis. Elvis came through Lubbock. He actually opened for Elvis.
Yeah, he did open.
Right. As Buddy and Bob in February. In February of 55, I think it was. Yes, 55. He played a place called the Fair Park Coliseum, opening for Elvis. And then in April 1955 at the Cotton Club in that area. And then in June, again at the same Coliseum. So 3 times he opened for him. And Elvis was pretty much, if you remember the show we did on the Sun Years on Elvis, he was touring the South. He was on a big tour of the South where he was getting more and more popular. By the time he got to Lubbock, there was a lot of fans, female fans, and guys were kind of like, hey, what's going on here with this dude, And then people that were into music, like Buddy, was saying, there's another element here to just playing music. We can actually get girls. So,
yeah, they say the girls would line up.
Yeah, they would line up to be with you. By the time he had incorporated, when he opened up for Elvis, he had incorporated a guy named Larry Wellborn on the stand-up bass, and a guy named Jerry Allison on drums. In October of 55, Holley opened for Bill Haley and the Comets and was seen by a Nashville talent scout named Eddie Crandall. Crandall was very impressed with what he saw, okay? And he persuaded the Grand Ole Opry manager, Jim Denny, to get Buddy, or try to get Buddy, a recording contract. A guy named Pappy Dave Stone, who was the DJ at KDAV, sent a demo. But Buddy was able to make a demo, and he sent it to Paul Cohen of Decca Records in February of 1956. Now, in the contract, Denny signed him right away. Okay, Paul Cohen signed him right away to Decca. Now, in this contract, Decca misspelled Buddy Holly's name. He spelled it Holly.
Yeah.
And that's how we got Buddy Holly. That's how it just stayed like that. He didn't change it. Okay. So in the contract, that's what it was. So on the records, that's what it was. And he took the E out. On January 26, 1956, Buddy Holly attended his first formal recording session. This was going to be produced by Owen Bradley, who was a very well-to-do producer at the time, very popular in country and western music.
Didn't he do like Patsy Cline?
I believe so. Yeah, like he worked with many, many people. He was kind of like Decca's guy. So Decca set him up with Buddy Holly. He attended 2 more sessions in Nashville, but Owen Bradley had all the control over the musicians that he could use. Buddy didn't appreciate that too much. He was in control of the arrangements of the songs. Buddy wanted more creative control, and that just was unheard of at the time. So these sessions didn't really go well. I mean, he recorded. He was very frustrated with the process.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to have more creative control over what he did, which was unheard of. Nobody had that.
Yeah, that didn't even exist right there about you having control of your own music.
Yeah, well, he wanted control over who would play on what. He felt comfortable with certain musicians, and with this kind of arrangement, he wasn't going to get that. So In April of '56, Decca released Blue Days, Black Nights as a single with the song Love Me as the B-side. Jim Denny included Holley on a tour opening for Farron Young, who was a country and western singer. They were promoted as Buddy Holly and the Two Tones, and later Decca would call them Buddy Holly and the Three Tunes. Okay. Now, Decca would also release a second single called Modern Don Juan, backed with You Are My One Desire on the B-side. His first and second single, those two, didn't make a splash at all. Okay, didn't make much of an impression. Nobody bought them. So on January 22nd, 1957, Decca dropped Buddy Holly, okay, from the label. And he was told he was not allowed to record any of those early songs that they released for anyone else for at least 5 years. Okay.
Wow.
Including songs that weren't released, I should say. Okay, stuff that they did in the studio. Now, Holley was very disillusioned with this experience he had with Decca and the record label. He was inspired, however, by the success of Buddy Knox's Party Doll and Jimmy Bowen's I'm Sticking With You. These are two big hit singles at the time. He visited a guy named Norman Petty, who had produced and promoted both of those songs. And he wanted to meet him, possibly work with him. Together with Jerry Allison, a bass player named Joe B. Maudlin, and rhythm guitarist Nicky Sullivan, they went to Petty's studio in Clovis, New Mexico, which is right on the other side of the line of Texas. Lubbock is in western Texas, and Clovis is right on the line of New Mexico and Texas, in New Mexico.
And he went to Petty so he could have more control of his music, right?
Well, Petty was smart. Okay, now Buddy Holly would be playing lead guitar at this point, and he would sing. Okay, and Petty kind of had a hands-off attitude and let him play and do what he wanted. Okay, he saw he had something in Buddy Holly, so he didn't try to change anything too much. So in that sense, he had way more creative control. By shifting over to lead, he was able to get the sound that he wanted, okay? And it all kind of started to gel together. Norman Petty would become his manager right away. And he sent the record that they had just recorded called That'll Be the Day, okay? It was something that they had worked on when he was with Decca, okay? Petty was not involved at that point, but and it was an early recording that wasn't released. So what they did was they went to find a label to put this out on. Now, he knew he had a contract with Decca saying that he couldn't put this stuff out, okay, under his name. So what he did was he would release it. He would release it under a new name, and that would be the Crickets. Okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he got connected with Brunswick Records in New York City. Brunswick was a very popular singles label, and they put it out under the name Crickets, not even the Crickets, just Crickets.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was released as a single with the song "I'm Looking for Someone to Love" on the B-side. Okay, now Petty and Holley would later learn that Brunswick Records was actually a subsidiary of Decca. Okay, so that could have gone either way, but it actually went in his favor, because what would happen is, because they were a subsidiary, now they could do that other stuff that they were working on before and rework it and get the sound that he wanted, because he didn't like how those sessions came out.
Oh, wow.
Okay? So he was able to do that. But what they did is, as the Crickets, he would be releasing stuff under Brunswick. There was a second label that was a subsidiary of Decca called Coral Records. And the Coral Records would pick up a solo contract. Okay, so he actually had a contract with the band and himself right
Wow.
away. Right away. He was like 21 years old. Okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I don't even think that could happen today, but it did then. Now, the single That'll Be the Day was released on May 27th, 1957, and a tour was booked as the Crickets, okay, with promoter Irvin Feld. Now, he had noticed the single That'll Be the Day was rising on the R&B charts, doing very well on the black R&B charts.
Yeah.
And he booked them for appearances in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and New York City. The band was set to perform at the Apollo Theater in Harlem between August 16th and August 22nd in 1957. Now, during these first performances in this tour, they weren't very well received. But what they did was they added the song Bo Diddley to their set. Okay. Now, yeah, Bo Diddley is a song written by Bo Diddley, performed by Bo Diddley. And they added that song to the set. And that really impressed the probably majority black audiences that they were playing in front of. Okay. And when they got to the Apollo, they actually did pretty well. Okay.
Wow.
And they were pretty well received. Now, encouraged by the singles success, That'll Be the Day, Petty started to prepare 2 album releases. Okay. A solo album and a Crickets album. Okay. Holley and the band would do an appearance on American Bandstand on August 26, 1957. And it was during the gigs at the Apollo the week earlier that they became friends with the Everly Brothers. Okay, and Everly Brothers would kind of guide Buddy Holly a little bit in the business, and they remained friends until his passing. Now, That'll Be the Day topped the U.S. charts called the Bestsellers in Stores charts. Okay, that was on September 23rd, and it went to number 1 in the UK for 3 weeks in November.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, he a short career that he had, he actually did very well in the UK.
Yeah,
and we'll talk about that.
Didn't he tour the UK also?
Yeah.
He hit the UK.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he would eventually. Okay, I believe more than once.
Mike, you want to hear something funny about Holley too? For his short career, 2 years, he made 2 appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah, yes, and if you remember the show we did on Ed Sullivan, they were the first one was a little shitty. Okay,
Yeah.
he didn't get along with Ed. Okay, see, and that's what I'm talking about. How like the real Buddy Holly, and then you kind of have this other image of him in a different way. He was badass. He wanted, he was serious about his music, and he wanted to make sure it was performed right. He wanted to perform whatever it was at that time, whatever he wanted to do. That's what he would do. And Ed Sullivan, you couldn't butt heads with him, so you would not be invited back. But he was invited back, and he did 2 shows. So he has a number 1 hit now with That'll Be the Day in the UK. And on September 20th, Coral Records, okay, the solo label, would release Peggy Sue. All right. Now, you go back, you look at the discography of Buddy Holly. Peggy Sue is under Buddy Holly. It's not under the Crickets. Okay, it's a Buddy Holly song, even though the Crickets are playing with them. Which I think had to be kind of, don't you think that was like a little shitty for the band? Maybe not getting the credit on some of these songs. I'm sure they got, they got their cut, whatever they didn't get ripped off.
Yeah.
But that wasn't Buddy's fault that they got ripped off. But, it must have been hard to be in the band and then only some of the songs being listed as Crickets. They were all good friends, so I guess it rolled off them. But maybe if they weren't such good friends, maybe it would have been a problem, So.
You know what? I never realized that Wedding Jenny played with Buddy Holly. He was in his band. I never knew that.
We're gonna get up to that. Yeah, we're gonna get up to that. Waylon Jennings started because of Buddy Holly.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. Now, they would release the song on September 20th called Peggy Sue. Okay. And the flip side was the song Every Day. Buddy Holly was credited as the performer, not the Crickets. And by October, Peggy Sue got to number 3 on Billboard's charts. That was the highest that he had at that point in America. And it also got to number 2 on the R&B charts. So that really was the highest at that point. Now, it would peak at number 6 on the UK charts. And as the success of the song grew, it brought more attention to Holley with the band now, starting to be billed as live shows, okay? They would bill them as Buddy Holly and the Crickets at that point. And just to clarify on this so you understand, even though it was being billed that way for live shows, it wasn't until 1962 that albums that came out, greatest hits and unreleased stuff, would come out as Buddy Holly and the Crickets. It would be a while. Yeah. So in the last week of September 1957, the band flew home to Lubbock, Texas to visit family. And Norman Petty had arranged some recording sessions in Oklahoma City where he was going to record with a band that he had, something he was doing on the side. Now, the Crickets drove to the location, and the only album recorded in Buddy's lifetime as the Crickets was recorded and finished there. It was called the Chirping Crickets. Okay. Now, this is one of the greatest albums of all time. Okay. The Chirping Crickets. It's an album I think that anybody who's serious about rock music should own, because it is kind of the template of what was going to come in only a couple of years from the other side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, Beatles, okay. Rolling Stones, everybody.
Yeah. I mean, the songs on there are just classic. You know, it's just every song is great. You know it. And one thing too, and it's pointed out in that documentary we watched, the Buddy Holly singles were all different. Do you know what I'm saying?
Like he was evolving, you know?
Well, he was evolving, and he made a point to make every song sound a little different. It wasn't just the same thing, okay? And I think the Beatles took a lesson from that, because their early singles all have slightly different sounds to them. You would think it's all the same if you're not really listening, because it's all that you know, stuff. But it's not, okay? You'd have a guitar solo somewhere. You'd have a harpsichord solo somewhere, or some kind of strange instrument. That was all coming from the influence from Buddy Holly. If you listen to the song Every Day, okay, there's no drum on that. You know what it is? The drum is slapping his.
Oh yeah,
his knees. Okay, he's slapping his hands on his knees. That's all it is. I forget the track. There's another one where they use a cardboard box for the drums. Okay, so you know he really was innovative in that sense. And sometimes these things would just come out of rehearsals. You know, you'd be doing a rehearsal, you might do a beat like this as a drummer trying to come up with it. Norman Petty was like, "Hey, what are you doing there? That sounds good." And they recorded it, and they kept it that way on the record. That was the genius of Norman Petty and Buddy. Okay, but you know, even though he ripped them off, but he still was a genius in that aspect.
Yeah.
Now, the Chirping Crickets LP was released on November 27th, 1957, and it got to number 5 in the UK. Okay, in October, Brunswick released the second single by the Crickets, "Oh Boy." Okay, which is probably my one of my favorites from him. "Oh Boy," "Crying, Waiting, Hoping." That's a great tune. The flip side of "Oh Boy" was "Not Fade Away."
Yeah.
And I'll say this, and I hope you all agree with me. I think that single is that's the British Invasion.
Oh yeah.
Right there. Okay.
The Rolling Stones, didn't the Rolling Stones make "Not Fade Away"? They did that.
They covered "Not Fade Away," I believe, on their first album.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you listen to "Oh Boy," and you could see it when he performed it, there are some clips of him performing it, all downstrokes with the guitar, all downstrokes, and that is the the template of what would come in the 70s with punk rock. All right. And I mean, of course, Johnny Ramone, who invented that, was a Buddy Holly fan. Okay. So it all comes full circle, and Buddy's influences on both sides of the Atlantic are a lot. Okay. Now, that single, "Oh Boy Would Not Fade Away," would go top 10. All right. And it got to number 13 on the R&B charts as well. "Not Fade Away," I could see might have been even more popular in the R&B world than "Oh Boy," because "Not Fade Away" sounds like a Bo Diddley song.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that chugging guitar sound that Bo did. You know, it just it had to be the reason the R&B fans were buying it. Holley and the Crickets would perform "That'll Be the Day" and "Peggy Sue" on Ed Sullivan, like we mentioned before, on December 1st, 1957. Now, following the appearance, Nicky Sullivan would leave the group, okay, because he really didn't like the touring that they were doing. He couldn't handle it, and he wanted to go back to school. Okay, so he would leave the band. They would kind of be a three-piece after that for a long time, okay? And on December 29th, Holley and the Crickets performed "Peggy Sue" on the Arthur Murray Party TV show. So quite a few TV appearances going on here.
Yeah, a lot.
Now, on January 8th, 1958, Buddy Holly and the Crickets joined America's Greatest Teenage Recording Stars tour. And on January 25th, Holly recorded "Rave On." Okay. The next day, he made his second appearance on Ed Sullivan. He was asked back, even though he didn't get along too good with Ed the first time. Okay. Now, he did "Oh Boy" in that appearance. And then he departed after that for Honolulu, Hawaii. On January 27th, from there, he departed for a week-long tour in Australia. Okay. I'm sure he was having a little fun in Hawaii before going to Australia. It was billed "The Big Show" in Australia, and it featured Jerry Lee Lewis, Paul Anka, and a singer named Jody Sands, who was popular at the time. In March, the band would tour the UK, playing 50 shows in 25 days.
That's crazy.
Think about that. You go to the UK. Yeah. Now the UK is not that big. You could do in 25 days you could do the whole country. So they were doing everywhere 2 shows a day.
So he pretty much spent most of his career on the road then.
Up to this point. Yeah. He really did. That was, it was the way to make money. Okay. He had success with the music, the singles. The album did okay. It would be later on, it would be, the Chirping Crickets would be revered a lot later. It did well early, but not that well. It did better in the UK. Now, the 25 days, 50 shows in 25 days. Now, the same month, Buddy's debut solo album would come out. Okay. It was just called Buddy Holly. And when they returned to America, Buddy Holly and the Crickets joined Alan Freed's Big Beat Show for 41 dates. Okay.
Another big tour.
And in April, Decca released "That'll Be the Day" again under Decca, okay, with the early sessions with Owen Bradley. That was kind of like the first version of it. Okay. They released it again. A new recording session in Clovis, New Mexico was arranged for May, and Holley hired Tommy Alsop to play lead guitar. This session produced the recordings of "It's So Easy" and "Heartbeat," and Holley was really impressed by Alsop and asked him to join the Crickets officially at that point. In June, Holley traveled alone to New York City for a solo recording session. Without the Crickets on these sessions, he chose to be backed by a jazz and R&B band. This is where he recorded "Now We're One" and Bobby Darin's early in the morning. It was during a visit to the Peer Southern Music Publishing offices in the Brill Building on Broadway that he met Maria Elena Santiago. I believe she was a secretary in the office.
Yeah.
She was 4 years older than him. Beautiful girl from Puerto Rico originally. Okay.
She's Puerto Rican, right?
Yes. She was born in Puerto Rico. She came here at a young age, lived with her aunt, and her aunt was involved with that publishing company as well and got her the job. Okay. So Buddy, I mean, it's just one of these things. The story is Buddy fell in love at first sight.
Yeah.
And I think she did with him too. And he asked her out. And she, this being, 1950s, she had to ask her aunt. And her aunt said, okay. And they went out on a date. And within a couple hours, he got on his knee on the first date and asked her out. Yeah, I mean, that's crazy.
That's crazy, man.
So she had to ask her aunt again. And her aunt said, well, what about his family? And this was, she had brought him home, okay, and asked. And Buddy supposedly said, well, if, my family doesn't know yet, if you let me use the phone, I'll tell them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it just went like that. And they ended up flying back to Lubbock, Texas on August 15th to be married in Texas. Now, Holley's manager, Norman Petty, and producer, didn't approve of this marriage.
No.
He kind of felt that it would affect record sales with the female fans if Buddy was not single anymore. This happened to a lot of artists in that time, 50s and 60s, early 60s. They would kind of hide their marriages.
Yeah, to keep the females,
they did it with John Lennon. They did it with the Beatles. John Lennon was married. Okay, well, I believe her name was her name Cynthia? I forget. I believe her name was Cynthia, and that's Julian Lennon's mother. Okay, so he was married to her, and they kept it quiet until one day. There's a famous clip where they're playing, and when they focus in on each of the Beatles playing, like they'll say, "Oh yeah, he's single," "Yes, girls, he's single," and then like somebody, I don't know, I guess they decided to put it out there, said he's married under John Lennon, so the word got out, but it took a little while. But yeah, I mean, this, Petty felt that Buddy Holly being married wasn't good for his career, so he asked to keep it quiet, which Buddy kind of resented. He didn't give a fuck about that. Okay. And he loved this woman. He wanted to put it out there that he was with her, but he kind of gave in a little bit. And Maria Elena would become part of the entourage, acting as a bookkeeper, kind of, helping out with the band, setting up and doing laundry and things like that. Okay. She would go on tour with him. All right. The Crickets now were starting to get frustrated with Petty as well. They controlled a lot of the proceeds of, the royalties. He really controlled it. Okay. And Buddy was starting to question now that he was getting pissed off with about the marriage being kept quiet. He was starting to question Petty's bookkeeping. And, as Maria Elena got more involved, okay, things would be revealed.
Yeah.
Okay. So Holley and Maria Elena went to many of the New York City venues at the time. They would go catch a lot of live music while they were staying in New York. One place they went to was the Village Gate, the Blue Note, the Village Vanguard, and Johnny Johnson's place was a popular spot. Holley was becoming more interested very interested in different styles of music. He wanted to learn how to play flamenco guitar, the Spanish style guitar. Okay. And he was getting interested in jazz. He wanted to make an album with Mahalia Jackson and even Ray Charles. He wanted to make an album with him too. Now he also wanted to get into acting, so he was branching out. He had all these ideas, and he ended up taking lessons at the Lee Strasberg Actor Studio.
Yeah, that's a big school.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Brando and a lot of those people in the 50s came out of there.
Yeah.
Now, Maria Elena went with Holley on tours, like I said, and she would be kind of, told, everybody would believe she was their secretary or their bookkeeper, okay? That she was not married to Buddy. She started to keep the money for the band, and she would get the money from the ticket holders and things like that, okay? And she kept the money instead of giving it to Norman Petty right away, which was the strength, what they had done in the past. Her aunt was also involved with some of the bookkeeping that she started to do. They realized that Petty was ripping them off.
Yeah.
Okay. What he was doing was he was taking royalties from Coral Records and Brunswick Records, the singles, and putting some of that money in an account that he had, a separate private account.
Yeah,
and
that's not good.
He was holding on to that money. Okay, so that was owed to the band and Buddy and the band. Buddy wanted, we found this out. He wanted to go retrieve the money. He was pissed. Okay, and he was going to fire Norman Petty right away. But at the recommendation of the Everly brothers, they would, he would discuss it with them, and they kind of told him, get a lawyer. Okay, he got a lawyer named Harold Orenstein to negotiate the royalties. The problem with Petty happened really because Petty just announced one day, I can't pay you. I don't have it. So now the question is, where's the money? And that's how it was all revealed that it was in another account. Now, at the time, New York promoter Manny Greenfield reclaimed a large part of Holley's earnings. He got some of the money. But the two, Holley and him, had a verbal agreement that he would get 5% of the bookings. This guy, Greenfield, was a promoter. So he agreed with Greenfield that he would get 5% of the revenue for tickets. And Greenfield kind of later felt that he was really working in a managerial capacity and wanted more money. This is why you should always have everything in writing.
Yeah.
Verbal agreement doesn't mean shit because one guy could say, no, you didn't say that. Okay.
Yeah, because they can be like, no, I never say that.
So this would end up being more, legal issues. Greenfield would sue him. And under New York law, because Holley's royalties originated in New York and were directed out of state, going to Petty, all right, there's a law that says if it's an out-of-state dealing, everything gets frozen. So he couldn't get any money.
Wow.
So he was screwed, okay? And, this would be the reason he'd have to go back out on tour again, which is the reason he died.
Yeah.
All right, so, it's fucked up how things can happen.
It's crazy.
Now, in September of 58, Holley would return back to Clovis, New Mexico, and recorded the song Reminiscing and Come Back Baby, which I find interesting because that was Norman Petty's studio and he was going back to use it again after all this going on. So I don't know what that was all about, right? Isn't that kind of strange? Why would you want to work with the guy again? You're in this legal entanglement. But I guess maybe that he just felt it was more, the music was the higher thing, and he could make a better music. So during these sessions,
the guy just let him really control the stuff,
Yeah, and he probably couldn't get that anywhere else, Now, during these sessions, he was asked to produce a young Waylon Jennings. Waylon Jennings was a DJ at the time. And the single was a track called Joel Blonde, and it was backed with the song called When Sin Stops, Love Begins. Okay? And Waylon Jennings got his career going because of Buddy Holly. All right. And it was Holly was becoming also very interested in what was going on in the New York music scene. They bought an apartment, Maria Elena and him, at 11 Fifth Avenue, right next to Washington Square Park. Apartment 4H at the Brevoort Apartments. Building is still there.
Yep.
Okay. And he was living in New York City when he recorded some acoustic songs. One called "What to Do," and the other called "Crying, Waiting, Hoping," which is a great track, one of my favorites. His final studio sessions would be on October 21st, 1958. It was at what used to be called the Pythian Temple Building, and that was on West 70th Street. It's still there, but it's like luxury condos now. It's not what it was before. It wasn't a record. It's not a recording studio anymore. These are known by Buddy Holly fans as the String Sessions. Okay, these are the songs that like he did, like True Love Ways, the very ballady, schmaltzy kind of songs. He had an orchestra. He had what was called the Dick Jacobs Orchestra behind him. They were an 18-piece orchestra featuring ex-members of the NBC Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Very good musician. There was also a very good saxophonist brought in named Boomie Richmond. The 3.5-hour session that he had produced the song True Love Ways, written by Buddy Holly, a song called Moon Dreams, written by Norman Petty, a song called Raining in My Heart, written by Felice and Baudelaire Bryant, and then a song called It Doesn't Matter Anymore, which was actually written by Paul Anka.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. Now, these 4 songs were the only ones Buddy ever recorded in stereo. Okay. Everything in those days was done in mono. But only the song Raining in My Heart was released in stereo, I believe, as a single. Okay. The others came out in mono, and then they would see stereo releases many years later. Now, Holly ended his association with Petty in December of 1958, but the remaining Crickets kept him on. Even though he ripped them off, they kept him on. Okay, as they split from Holly as well. Okay, but the split wasn't a nasty split. It was amicable. Buddy was kind of, it was more about logistics. Buddy and Maria Elena was spending all their time in New York City. Okay, they had an apartment there, and the Crickets were Lubbock, Texas boys. They didn't want to go to New York City that much. Okay, and they didn't like going there. And Petty was still holding royalties. This stuff was not settled. Okay, and Buddy was forced to start a new band and return to extensive touring again. Like I said, which got him killed.
Yeah, okay. Pretty much.
Yeah. Now, Holly would vacation with his wife, Maria Elena, in Lubbock, and they spent some time with Waylon Jennings. This was at the end of the year, December 1958, over the holidays. There was going to be a tour called the Winter Dance Party Tour, and it would feature a new band for Buddy. Okay. It was Waylon Jennings on bass, of course, Buddy. Okay. Tommy Allsup on guitar, and a guy named Carl Bunch playing drums. Now, Holly and Jennings would fly together to New York City on January 15th, 1959. They would stay at his apartment by Washington Square Park, and they had a meeting with General Artists Corporation, who was in charge of promoting this winter dance tour. So they had some business to do. Now, when they were done with their business, they traveled by train to Chicago to meet up with the rest of the band. The Winter Dance Party Tour began in Milwaukee on January 23rd, 1959. And the amount of travel on this tour
was
not thought out well. It was not planned well. The distances between shows, venues, involved a lot of travel time that was almost impossible to do. You just couldn't drive that fast, to get there. And the weather was extremely bad. It was an extremely cold winter in that area. All right, Milwaukee, Iowa, places like that they had to play.
Minnesota, all those places are cold.
Right, and you talk about this now in 2021, and you think, oh, they're probably in this big luxury bus, and everything is taken care of. There's food, there's alcohol, whatever. Okay, but that wasn't the case. In those days, these guys all toured together. It didn't matter if you were the headliner or not. You were packed in with everybody else. It was just a coach bus.
Yeah.
There was no food, unless you stopped at a truck stop. All right.
Yeah.
There was no luxuries that you get today. Okay.
It was very different.
It was seats. You'd fall asleep in your chair, and then you'd have to do a show that day. You feel like shit, So it's hard, it's hard to imagine that, but that's what it was. And because of the cold, the buses broke down a lot, and the way luck is, it break down at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's 30 degrees below outside with the windshield. So this led to some really bad situations where the bus would break down. Carl Bunch, the drummer, one time actually had to be taken to the hospital because he was getting frostbite on his feet.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
Yeah. Before the February 2nd gig at the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa, Holley had enough of the bus breaking down and all the logistical problems. He decided to charter a plane to go to Fargo, North Dakota after the gig, and then they would catch up and get a ride to Moorhead, Minnesota from there, where they had to play their next gig. All right. Now, the small plane could seat the pilot and 3 passengers.
Yeah.
So Buddy asked J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper, if he wanted to take a flight with him. J.P. Richardson was a big guy, and he wasn't comfortable on the bus. He was also suffering from like a minor flu. He wasn't feeling good, and he agreed to be on the plane. Now, Buddy then asked Dion, who was part of the tour, okay, and Dion, didn't want to pay the $36 ticket. He just said he couldn't.
A month's rent.
That was a month's rent for him back in the Bronx, and he said, I can't justify that. I'm not going to do that. I'll go on with the bus. So, and then it came down to Tommy Alsop and Richie Valens, okay? And Richie flipped a coin, and he called heads, and he won, okay? So Tommy Alsop was out. Richie Valens was in. So now you've got the basically their fate is sealed. You got Buddy on the plane, Richie, and J.P. Richardson, the Big Bopper.
It's crazy, man.
Now, years later, Tommy Alsop would actually open a restaurant in Fort Worth, Texas, named Heads Up, in honors of Richie Valens. So, now the pilot's name was Roger Peterson. And like I said at the beginning of the show, he was a pilot, but he was not trained to fly by instrument only.
Yeah, he couldn't fly, but he didn't, though. He wasn't certified.
Yeah, he wasn't certified to do it, okay, which probably didn't have as much experience. It's all about hours, right, with pilots. They have to have a certain amount of hours doing this, doing that, and then they get certified. He was just certified to fly basically in good weather. And this was not good weather. There was snow. There was, freezing rain. It was a horrible night. They weren't going that far, which Buddy probably figured was no big deal because they weren't going that far. But the plane had a new type of gyroscope on it, and it was called a Sperry. And it works different than other gyroscopes that Peterson might have been used to. If a person's untrained on the Sperry gyroscope, you could read it backwards on accident. okay? And you'll think that you're climbing in altitude, where you're actually descending.
It's crazy, man.
And that's exactly what happened. Okay, now, shortly after 12:55 a.m. on February 3rd, 1957, after the show that ended at midnight, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, Richardson, and Peterson were killed instantly when they crashed into a frozen cornfield not too long after liftoff. They were 5 miles northwest of Mason City, Iowa.
Wow.
The three guys, the passengers, were ejected from the plane, and they died from extensive head and chest injuries. Holley was only 22 years old. Still young.
Wasn't Ritchie Valens was young too, right?
Ritchie Valens, I think, might have been 19.
19,
He
wow.
was very young. A recently pregnant Maria Elena, she had just announced to Buddy that she was pregnant before he went on tour, watched the first reports of her husband's death on television. All right. The following day, she had a miscarriage. Lost the baby from all the stress of that. Holly's mother also saw the first reports on television and screamed and fainted, okay, when she heard about the tragedy. And out of this incident is the policy that authorities have today of always letting the family members know right away before you announce that somebody died in an accident. And they didn't have that policy before. It was all over the news. Buddy Holly's dead. And Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper. And the family didn't even know. That's terrible, okay, to find out in that way. Okay, but authorities don't do that anymore.
Yeah, Maria still believed that if she would have gone on the tour, he would have never got on that plane.
That's true. That's true. Now, his funeral was held on February 7th, 1959 at the Tabernacle Baptist Church in Lubbock, Texas. Maria Elena did not attend the funeral, okay? And she's actually said she's never visited the grave either, okay? And like you just mentioned, to this day, she kind of blames herself. Now, she's about 90 now.
Yeah, she got him.
And that documentary we saw was about 4 years ago. She looked pretty good for late 80s. And, you know, she got emotional even then in the show, you know. I mean, she remarried and had a couple of kids, I think, and got divorced. Okay, so she's by herself, basically. But she blamed herself. She felt that if she had gone with him, she wasn't feeling good because she just got pregnant.
Yeah.
Right? And she normally would have gone on tours with him. That's what she had been doing prior. But this time she stayed home. And she felt that if he knew she was pregnant, which he did, okay, he wouldn't have put her on that plane. And he wouldn't have gone. So he wouldn't have died.
Whew, what a story,
yeah.
man.
I mean, what a ton of guilt to put on yourself. Maybe it's true. Maybe they both.
She got survival remorse. You know, people that survive, they get that remorse that they lost their loved one, and his thing was a fairy tale ending. You know, like it was like they met and it was love at first sight. But I guess he had a premonition. He probably knew he was going to die young.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll never know. Now his headstone.
Everything happened so fast. Boom.
Yeah,
boom,
I mean,
boom.
it was not, the career was only not even 2 years long.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay. Now his headstone carries the correct spelling of his name. It actually Holley, and there's also like a carving of a Fender Stratocaster, which was his trademark guitar. Yeah, so. You know, one thing I find really interesting, if you're going to kind of, you know, talk about hypotheticals like what if, okay, you know, he was evolving musically, and you got to wonder, like, if he would have gone in a less rock and roll direction with those later songs that he had done, you know, like True Love Ways is like a, you know, it's a love ballad, no guitar on it. It's all strings.
I also think once he fell in love, he was writing a little different.
Yeah, and his guitar playing, he wanted to branch out into jazz and other stuff. You know, would he have made a record with Ray Charles? Would he have made a record with Mahalia Jackson? What if he had lived in, into the 60s? How would have that changed the music scene?
It might have been a whole different scene. We just don't know.
Whole different thing. I mean, the short career that he had totally blew open in England and made the British invasion possible. All right, because British music before Buddy Holly was totally different. Okay, there was a popular music called skiffle, just sort of like countryish in a way. I don't know, but it's different. But a lot of early guys like Bill Wyman from the Stones, they used to play in skiffle bands. Had he lived, who knows what that scene would have been like too? What kind of music he would have made that would have influenced that? So
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean it's really and in the 70s with when we were kids, I mean there was a re-interest in the 1950s, right? You had shows like Happy Days, right? Happy Days,
yes.
Shine On, Grease, all that like interest in the 50s. He could have made a big comeback.
And imagine if he would start making movies and stuff like that too.
Maybe he did. Maybe he would have made movies. Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Maybe he might have not been singing. Maybe he might have been an actor.
That's a good point. It's a good point. I think he might have gotten into acting. He could have done anything. He was very talented with music. We know that. Could he have been a good actor? Possibly. It could have kind of transformed into that. He was friends with guys like Paul Anka, who were just beginning their careers, but they had a lot of pull in show business. Paul Anka was friends with Frank Sinatra, people like that. He could have gone in the 60s, had he lived, he could have gone into so many different directions. So it's really a tragedy. And it's really the first tragedy in rock music or popular music at the time. Nothing like that had ever happened before in pop music. Hank Williams would die. Okay, and that would be a big thing for country music fans. But and there were accidents with other people, but this was a plane crash. Planes were kind of a new thing at that time. And I think the country lost a little innocence that day. We weren't the same after that. You can ask people like my parents' age, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that was a horrible tragedy." They remember that. They remember where they were when they heard about it, just like JFK. Or 9/11. Where were you? So
what a tragedy.
So I got you today, Buddy Holly in the bag.
Yeah, man. What a great story, man. We got a lot of information about Holley, his career, his wife, and he's the guy that paved the way for the British invasion, and a guy that was on Ed Sullivan a few times. So the guy was impressive for a very short career. He did a lot.
Yes, he did. And
he was 22, which is even more crazy.
Yeah, in just that short time.
Yeah.
And every song was a little different. And it really showed his versatility and his talent. He's one guy that I always say, like, it would have been cool as shit to see him live. You go back in time and see that. You know what I mean? Because it really was different. Really was very different.
Yeah.
So, all right. Where can we find you, Rob, if we need you on the internet?
So if you want to drop me some notes or send me an email at Getting Lumped Up. Rob Rossi at gettinglumpedup.com. You can also look me up in Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter if you want to reach me out. Mike, where can we find you?
Okay, I'm on all the social medias. I'm on Instagram, RockerMike212. I'm on Clout Hub and MeWe under RockerMike. I'm on Facebook under Rock Go Mike. RockerMike. And I'm on the, of course, Facebook, the Rockshow podcast group page, where we get into the stuff we talk about and the podcasts and different songs every day and little tidbits. I want to remind everybody again to please let me know, give me some suggestions for 4 shows that are going to be for early 2022. We did this last year with great results. We had a whole month dedicated to requests. Let me know what you want to hear. Send me a private message or put it on the Rock Show podcast group page on Facebook. Also, this is the last Rock Show of the year. Okay, this will be, by the time you're watching this, will be the end of November. I'm taking a couple of weeks off to concentrate on the Conspiracy 420 show that we do. We will return for a year-ending rock show at the end of December with Scott the Clown, maybe some other guests. And then starting in January, we're going to have a new format every other week with the rock show. And then every other week with the Conspiracy 420 show. So, yes, rock show is going to take a little backseat, not every week, but we're still going to be working hard on it. Send me your suggestions. I want to put 4 shows together between January and March based on your suggestions. Somebody suggested your buddy, Jerry Masterson, right, from upstate. Yeah. Okay. He suggested Blue Cheer. So we might do that. Okay. I'm taking anything into consideration. Just don't be an asshole and tell me to do Billy Joel, because that's not happening. All right.
Hey, how is Black History? Are we only doing 2 shows for Black History?
I think we might do 4 shows.
Okay.
I have a couple of ideas. I haven't thought it through yet. February is right now it's up in the air, but I'm putting it together. We might go off topic a little bit. We might get into a little jazz, a little something I'm thinking about, but I'll let you know soon about that.
We should do some Miles Davis.
You read my mind, kiddo. That's one of them I was thinking of.
You know, we definitely got to do Miles Davis, because come on, you can't talk about jazz and not talk about. And I think if I could probably get like Richie. He's a huge jazz guy. So I got a guy that does jazz that he knows.
Richie Hill.
The building department guy. So we can bring in Richie as a special guest. So he's definitely a jazz guy.
Okay. Yeah, it's good because I like jazz. I like free jazz. I like Miles Davis, Big Brew, stuff like that. We might do a show on him. I'm thinking Coltrane. I'm thinking Sun Ra, which would be really fascinating because Sun Ra's nuts.
Yeah, that sounds good, man.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of doing that. And so the suggested shows that I want you guys to let me know, I'll do 2 in January and 2 in March if you can get me some bands that we are good to talk about.
All right, man. So this is another end of another wonderful show. Our program is changing for the New Year's, and thank you for following us.
At the end of the year, I'm going to pick my record of the year. I've already decided on that. I'm not going to reveal it yet.
And and we got to talk about something else off the air. So
okay.
All right. So to everybody out there, don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
See you next time.
Take care, people.
Bye.
Podcast you will hear that will be music to your ears. You'll learn about bands you love or may not know, and it's only here on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. So tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on the Rock Show.